These are the secret regions where Boston's billionaires actually live, and they only get crazier as we move. We're talking an offshore island where the cheapest house costs $3.5 million and the record sale was $42 million. A historic neighborhood so exclusive that firemen have to use the service entrance even during kitchen fires, and a downtown tower where a $44.5 million penthouse exists, but nobody knows who bought it because the purchase was filed through a Delaware LLC. Let's get into the full list. Number 8. West Cambridge and Brattle Street. Brattle Street in West Cambridge is where the smartest people in America happen to also be extraordinarily wealthy, which creates this weird dynamic where nobody actually talks about the money. It's called Tory Row because colonial-era politicians lived here, and that historical branding apparently mattered so much that it stuck for 3 centuries. Nobel Prize laureates live on this street. Harvard administrators. Bill Gates lived here during his MIT days. The estates sit so far back on their properties that you could live next door and never see another human being, which is apparently exactly what intellectual elites want after they've finished winning at everything else. These properties almost never hit the public market. They move through quiet conversations between families and estate lawyers, property to property. When a 7-bedroom estate at 153 Brattle Street actually listed for $13.9 million, it felt like a breach of protocol because these neighborhoods operate on the understanding that marketing your wealth is fundamentally uncouth. You list your property, that means you need money, which means you're not actually as successful as people on Brattle Street assume. Huron Village sits adjacent to Brattle Street and attracts executives from biotech giants like Moderna and Biogen, alongside world-renowned artists like cellist Yo-Yo Ma. Single-family homes trade between $4 million and $8 million, which sounds insanely expensive until you realize nobody here is buying real estate. They're buying access to a neighborhood where the entire social infrastructure revolves around intellectual achievement rather than wealth display. There are independent bookstores, artisan boutiques. The whole thing feels designed for people who've already made enough money that proving it would be embarrassing. The real Cambridge money moved to Kendall Square, which markets itself as the most innovative square mile on the planet. Venture capitalists and technology founders work directly above their penthouses valued between $2.5 million and $4 million, which creates this absurd efficiency where you can literally walk downstairs from your bedroom to your billion-dollar portfolio. That's not luxury. That's logistics optimized for capital accumulation. Number 7. Brookline and Chestnut Hill. Brookline made a weird choice that no other elite Boston neighborhood made. Instead of creating isolation, it created integration. The town connects directly to the Green Line transit system, has active retail districts like Coolidge Corner, and functions like a real place where people actually interact with each other. Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots and is worth roughly $6 billion, chose to live here rather than disappear into a gated compound. Seth Klarman, founder of the Baupost Group hedge fund managing billions in capital, lives in Chestnut Hill right next door. These are people who could literally own any property on Earth and chose a neighborhood where they'd encounter their neighbors. The country club on Clyde Street was founded in 1882 and holds the distinction of being America's first club dedicated exclusively to outdoor sports. The 230-acre property hosted the 1913 U.S. Open won by Francis Ouimet, a local caddy, who legend says caddied for the defending champions. That history embedded itself so deeply into Brookline's identity that it became the central anchor for the entire community. You don't join the country club for new amenities. You join because your family probably belonged in 1910 and you're just maintaining institutional continuity. A 6-bedroom mansion at 280 Warren Street listed for $14.85 million. A 9.4-acre estate at 63 Goddard Avenue for $16 million. These properties command premiums not because they're isolated, but because Brookline created the unlikely formula of substantial estates plus active community engagement. Your billionaire neighbors actually attend town meetings. They participate in local charities. Their kids attend Brookline High School. Wealth here doesn't separate you from society. It just gives you a nicer version of the same society. The psychological appeal is genuinely bizarre compared to every other wealthy enclave. Most billionaires want complete privacy. Brookline billionaires apparently want privacy plus community involvement, which is like wanting both anonymity and recognition simultaneously. But it works. The neighborhood maintains consistent demand from executives and entrepreneurs who've decided that having nearby billionaires who also coach youth soccer somehow matters. Number 6. Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard operates as Nantucket's slightly more relaxed offshore cousin, featuring historic farming estates and private deepwater docks. The island's real estate benchmark got completely redefined in late 2025 when a 15,000-square-foot mansion on Katama Bay sold for $37.5 million, which is the moment everyone in Boston real estate realized that oceanfront property off-island doesn't follow normal pricing logic. Les Wexner, founder of L Brands and billionaire retail magnate, acquired Blue Heron Farm in Chilmark for $37 million. That property just happened to be where Barack and Michelle Obama rented for $50,000 per week before they decided to just buy their own place instead. Think about that psychology for a second. The sitting president needs a summer retreat, so he rents a billionaire's estate. Then he gets tired of being a renter and purchases his own compound because apparently even presidents get annoyed with vacation rental agreements. That transaction structure reveals everything about how wealthy people operate. You rent temporarily, you buy permanently, you never maintain the renter mentality if you have options. The island functions as ultimate summer networking playground where Boston's financial leaders conduct private transactions that nobody ever hears about. It's not as immediately exclusive as Nantucket because Martha's Vineyard has actual history, actual farms, actual character that wasn't manufactured in the past decade. The capital here is patient capital that understands its buying continuity rather than speculation. Your neighbor probably had a grandfather who owned that land. That temporal depth apparently matters to certain billionaires. The ferry requirement creates this beautiful filter mechanism. You cannot casually arrive on Martha's Vineyard. You have to deliberately choose to get there, which means the island has naturally selected for people who specifically want isolation enough to endure ferry schedules. That self-selection creates community cohesion that artificially expensive gated neighborhoods can never match, because those communities attract people purely through price gatekeeping rather than shared philosophical commitment to being remote. Number 5. Back Bay. Back Bay was built on reclaimed land in the late 1800s and created this genuinely unique market where you can own either a historic Victorian mansion or a modern glass penthouse, depending on your tolerance for visibility. Commonwealth Avenue features brick townhouses routinely trading above $13.5 million, while newer developments offer vertical alternatives at comparable prices. The median hangs around $3.9 million, which is artificially low because the ultra-luxury market operates completely separately from normal price discovery. One Dalton Street is a 61-story tower housing Four Seasons private residences that basically functions as a secure storage facility for global capital that prefers not to be noticed. Over 35% of the units are owned by limited liability companies or trusts specifically designed to make beneficial ownership forensically impossible to discover. Nearly 40% of corporate entities are organized in Delaware, which means you could spend years investigating who actually owns the penthouse next to yours and never find a real human name. A merged 58th floor penthouse created by combining two separate units marketed for $38 million. The carrying costs are genuinely brutal. Annual property taxes run $95,000. Condo fees, another $84,000. You're paying roughly $180,000 yearly just to maintain legal occupancy of a property that probably sits empty most of the year while its Delaware trust fund handles the bills. The whole infrastructure is designed around purchasing invisibility rather than actual real estate appreciation. The Quinn House at 217 Commonwealth Avenue reopened in 2021 after a $50 million restoration by Sandy and Paul Edgerly, former Bain Capital managing director. The 56,000-square-foot clubhouse houses over 400 original artworks, including Picasso and Warhol pieces. Inside there's Bondo's with a chandelier made from tree roots, Lunasol as a secondary dining space, Scotty's as an Art Deco champagne lounge with literal buttons labeled "Push for Champagne," and The Hideaway, which is a speakeasy hidden behind a bookshelf like you're living in a Prohibition-era fantasy. This is where Back Bay's elite gather to convince themselves they're cultured, rather than just wealthy. Back Bay created the formula where you choose your level of visibility. Historic families choose visible brownstones and preservation gatekeeping. New wealth chooses invisible towers and corporate ownership structures. Both pay equivalent prices. Both get different benefits. That accommodation of multiple wealth philosophies simultaneously is why Back Bay remains the most actively transacted luxury market in Boston. Number 4. Weston and Dover. Weston and Dover are so wealthy that Massachusetts literally gave up trying to quantify it. The census reports median household income exceeding $250,000, which is basically the government's way of saying, we can't count any higher. Dover ranks at $138,720 per capita income. Weston sits at $131,707. These aren't numbers that make sense. They're infrastructure breaking under the weight of too much accumulated capital. Weston operates with residential zoning requiring minimum lot areas of 60,000 square feet in the least restrictive district. That's roughly 1.4 acres minimum just to legally build a house. Your nearest neighbor cannot get close enough to see your property line, which is the entire point. Typical homes run $2.2 million to $3 million, with premier estates commanding whatever premium the market will bear. The 4 Willow Road compound listed for $29 million, which positions it directly competitive with Aspen or Palm Beach estates, despite being a 45-minute drive from downtown Boston. Now, here's what's genuinely unsettling about Weston. Residents describe Saturday afternoons as feeling like a beautiful ghost town. The nearest Starbucks requires a 15-minute drive. The entire commercial infrastructure is deliberately minimal because Weston residents conduct their entire lives privately. You don't casually walk to a coffee shop. You don't spontaneously bump into neighbors. Your social interactions require strategic planning because the town's zoning regulations literally prohibit casual human contact. Dover takes this isolation logic further. Tech billionaires and private equity founders gravitate here specifically because neighboring estates sit completely invisible from each other. You could have a neighbor worth $8 billion and never know because the landscaping and acreage create absolute visual isolation. The town has virtually zero commercial core, making daily life entirely car-dependent and cementing Dover's status as a peaceful retreat that's genuinely 45 minutes from the city. That temporal distance becomes psychological distance that becomes actual separation. What both towns reveal is that the wealthiest people in Boston don't actually want to be in Boston. They want private compounds so isolated that human contact becomes optional rather than inevitable. The $250,000 median household income isn't bragging rights. It's the price of admission to communities explicitly designed for disappearance. You're paying premium prices for the privilege of becoming completely invisible to everyone except the people you specifically invite. Number 3. Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill represents the historic epicenter of Boston's traditional Protestant elite, featuring federal-style row houses on cobblestone streets with antique gas lamps illuminating properties that have housed generational wealth for literally centuries. The South Slope maintains institutional old money while the North Slope transitioned to young professionals, creating this interesting class separation within a single neighborhood that's barely 2 miles from downtown. Average home prices around $4.5 million in 2025, reflecting supply constraints so severe that new inventory arrives roughly once per decade. Lewisburg Square is the actual headquarters of Beacon Hill Power, a private square where historic townhouses command prices that defy any rational real estate logic. Recent development firms acquired multi-unit rental buildings and converted them back into single-family estates, which is the process of eliminating affordable housing to create ultra-luxury compounds. A 6-bedroom townhouse sold for $22 million after developers purchased the vacant building for $8.9 million in 2023. That arbitrage reveals the actual dynamic. You're not buying real estate based on market conditions. You're buying scarcity through architectural conversion. Fewer units, higher prices. Repeat. 22 Lewisburg Square, a 7,424 square foot brick townhouse built in 1835, listed for $17.99 million before adjusting to $14.5 million. Nearby properties maintain estimated values of $16.5 million and $14.95 million. These aren't appreciating assets. They're defensive holdings where pricing power derives entirely from the refusal to sell and the architectural impossibility of creating replacement inventory. You cannot build a new townhouse on Beacon Hill. Historical preservation prevents it. That regulatory moat creates infinite pricing power for existing properties. Amos Hofstadter Jr., cable television pioneer and Bar Foundation founder, lives in the historic Second Harrison Gray Otis House on Mount Vernon Street. Purchased in 2003 for $12 million, it's currently assessed at $18.2 million. He recently sued neighbors Sarah Riley and Per Ostman over a proposed roof deck at their property. The dispute was about privacy invasion and increased noise from rooftop activities. Billionaires waging legal warfare with other wealthy neighbors over a single architectural feature. That's the level of property control Beacon Hill residents maintain. Your roofline becomes a legal battle. Your decorative choices become someone else's legal liability. The Somerset Club at 42 to 43 Beacon Street is Boston's most exclusive private institution, and it's literally unmarked. You cannot find it. Nobody advertises it. The only way to know it exists is if you're already supposed to know it exists. Founded in 1852, the club occupies a grand granite mansion with crystal chandeliers, damask draperies, and generational oil portraits. The culture bans mobile phones, requires jackets, serves 5-course dinners on porcelain bearing the club's crest. During a 1940s kitchen fire, responding firemen were famously requested to use the service entrance to avoid drawing public attention to the club's interior. That detail is almost perfect in its revelation of wealth psychology. The building is literally on fire. Firemen are responding. And the concern is that the fire department might see the interior. That's not just exclusivity. That's paranoia, elevated to architectural principle. You design your building around the assumption that even emergency responders shouldn't witness what's inside. Number 2. Nantucket. Nantucket's real estate market shifted permanently around the moment everyone realized land scarcity could justify infinite pricing. The sub-$2 million market basically vanished, representing less than 19% of sales and usually just old cottages needing demolition. The median home value sits at $3.5 million, while average sales float around $5 million, which means most transactions exist at price points most people couldn't even comprehend. The ultra-luxury segment operates completely separately, where off-market deals mean transaction prices remain literally unknown. Monomoy neighborhood hosted the record $42 million sale of 68 and 72 Monomoy Road in September 2023. Nearby properties at Berkeley Avenue traded for $38.1 million. In the Cliff neighborhood, 3 Sherburne Way sold for $37.75 million and 21 Lincoln Avenue for $36 million. These numbers circulate among ultra-wealthy people like meaningful data points, but the actual transactions remain opaque. Off-market private placements mean price discovery becomes forensically impossible. You could spend years investigating and never determine what something actually cost because nobody wanted the transaction to be public. Abigail Johnson, CEO of Fidelity Investments and the wealthiest Massachusetts resident at approximately $19.7 billion net worth, owns a historic seaside estate on Nantucket, acquired in 2002 for $9.72 million. She also maintains permanent primary residence in Milton, Massachusetts. That means one of the world's richest people owns properties simultaneously on 2 separate islands plus historic Boston neighborhoods, which illustrates how wealth at this scale doesn't reduce to single locations. You just acquire multiple sanctuaries for different seasons and different moods. What makes Nantucket genuinely fascinating is its function as offshore wealth management infrastructure. The ferry creates physical distance that discourages casual visitation while maintaining helicopter access for billionaires who need to relocate quickly. The island's strict historical preservation guidelines prevent new development, which artificially protects existing property values through regulatory scarcity. The off-market transaction culture means nobody ever knows actual market prices. That opacity becomes a feature rather than a bug. You're not just buying real estate, you're buying the privilege of keeping your real estate transactions private. Nantucket isn't somewhere you move permanently. It's where you migrate seasonally while maintaining simultaneous residences elsewhere. This multi-location strategy allows billionaires to participate in Boston's institutional infrastructure while maintaining complete separation from urban visibility. You conduct business downtown. You vacation offshore. The geographic separation enables psychological separation that feels cleaner than hiding within the same city. Number 1. Seaport District. The Seaport transformed from industrial waterfront and rail yards into Boston's most expensive neighborhood on a price per square foot basis once the Big Dig completed and submerged Interstate 93. The neighborhood serves as primary capital engine for biotech, technology, and venture capital sectors. The median sale price in early 2026 hit $1.8 million with premier price per square foot, around $2,200. Boston proper displays median prices of $812,500 at $603 per square foot, which means Seaport real estate costs roughly 3 times more per unit despite being newer, shorter history, and built on filled land. The neighborhood exhibits 44.2% of all households earning over $200,000 annually, which is the highest concentration of top-tier earners in the city. The Seaport contributes approximately 10% of Boston's entire municipal property tax base, despite occupying a fraction of municipal land. This is where new money actually congregates. They're not preserving historic architecture. They're creating contemporary wealth infrastructure designed for maximum velocity capital. The St. Regis Residence's grand penthouse atop 150 Seaport Boulevard spans 10,609 square feet across 2 levels with floor-to-ceiling harbor views, a glass staircase, Italian marble flooring, and a private acrylic infinity pool sheltered by a retractable glass roof. It initially listed for $49.5 million in mid-2025, before adjusting to $44.5 million early 2026. Positioning it as the single most expensive residential listing in Massachusetts. That's already absurd until you discover shipping executive George P. Hasiotis purchased 10 separate luxury units within the same building, meaning one individual controls approximately $150 million worth of Seaport real estate across multiple penthouses. He's not buying investment properties. He's buying redundant residences at overlapping price points. The opacity layer is genuinely fascinating. Over 35% of ultra-luxury condominiums are owned by limited liability companies or trusts deliberately designed to obscure beneficial ownership. Nearly 40% of corporate entities organize in Delaware specifically to shield real buyers from public detection. A $44.5 million penthouse might be owned by a Cayman Islands trust that was established by an individual who may not actually live in the United States. The entire infrastructure of modern vertical luxury revolves around making ownership forensically difficult to discover. You could hire investigators and never determine who lives in the units you're looking at. But here's the detail everyone conveniently ignores. The Seaport is built entirely on filled land. The multi-billion-dollar real estate footprint faces severe climate risk from rising sea levels and storm surges. Lower-level infrastructure, site protection, and insurance underwriting across the entire district face material threats. Billionaires are paying record prices for penthouses in a neighborhood that may experience catastrophic environmental vulnerability within 2 decades. They're either betting on climate adaptation technology or deliberately ignoring future risk because present property appreciation feels more pressing. That's not real estate. That's accelerated capital liquidation disguised as investment. And that's a wrap on the 8 regions where Boston's billionaires actually live. From the offshore islands where transactions remain opaque to the historic neighborhoods where legal battles erupt over rooflines, and from the ghost towns where $250,000 median income creates invisible wealth to the waterfront towers, where corporate ownership structures obscure actual buyers, Boston's billionaires didn't create one elite enclave. They created nested systems of exclusivity operating simultaneously. Quick question. Would you rather live on an island where nobody knows your transaction price or live in a tower where nobody knows your real identity? Let us know in the comments. And if this changed how you think about Boston's actual wealth infrastructure, make sure to like the video. And for more such interesting peeks into American wealth, subscribe to Global Status, because we drop videos like this every day. Catch you next time.